Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a story that is honestly just as much about human frailty as it is about divine purpose. We're tracing the lifelong pilgrimage of a deeply flawed yet deeply chosen man. You see, his life isn't defined by just one clean, easy moment of enlightenment. It's defined by decades of struggle, tension, and what we can really only describe as relentless grace. This is the story of a man who literally had to wrestle his true identity into existence. He was broken, he was reshaped, and ultimately renamed.
So let's kick things off by asking a pretty profound question. It's one that perfectly frames our central character's entire journey. What happens when a man spends his entire life fighting tooth and nail for a blessing that was actually his all along? I mean, it really speaks to that deep human desire in all of us to control our own destiny, right? To secure our own outcomes through sheer willpower and strategy rather than just trusting the process. As we look at the life of Jacob today, keep this question in the back of your mind, because his intense need to control and grasp for the blessing basically shapes absolutely everything that happens to him.
Let's start right at the beginning with Act 1, The Grasper. Now, Jacob's story actually kicks off before he even takes his first breath. He doesn't enter the world peacefully, and his life definitely doesn't unfold along a simple, straight path. From the very beginning, his existence is marked by this intense prenatal struggle. His mother, Rebekah, was experiencing such a violent, chaotic conflict within her that she actually went to ask the Lord what on earth was happening, and God's answer, which is recorded in Genesis, was stunning. He said, "Two nations are in thy womb, and the elder shall serve the younger." This was a shocking prophecy because it completely turned the ancient customs of the world upside down. Back then, the firstborn was always supposed to get the biggest inheritance and take over the family leadership. But God declared it was going to be backwards. The younger would be the one who mattered most. The blessing was already his from the very start.
So when delivery day finally arrives, the first twin, Esau, comes out. But the second baby doesn't just follow quietly behind him. No, he emerges physically gripping onto Esau's heel. And because of this, they named him Jacob, which literally translates to heel grabber or supplanter, basically someone who takes another person's place. This early identity totally cements who he is. He's someone who grasps for the right thing, someone who desperately desires what has been promised to him, but who constantly relies on his own calculated, sometimes shady methods to take it. Now, it's not necessarily a moral failure right at birth, obviously, but it's an orientation. He wants to overtake.
And you look at this household as the boys grow up, and it's basically a masterclass in family dysfunction. We have two completely opposite brothers. Esau is this rugged man of the field, he's a cunning hunter, and he's totally favored by his father Isaac, who just loves the wild game he brings home. Jacob, on the other hand, is described as a plain man dwelling in tents. He's more domestic, much more strategic, more reflective, and he's heavily favored by his mother Rebekah. This deeply divided household ultimately sets the perfect stage for betrayal. Jacob uses his strategic nature to take advantage of an exhausted, starving Esau, trading a simple bowl of stew for the incredibly valuable birthright. And later, with his mother orchestrating the whole thing, Jacob goes even further. He disguises himself in animal skins and his brother's clothes to straight up deceive his blind father into giving him the irrevocable final blessing. So he secures the promise, sure, but he does it entirely through deception.
Which brings us to Act 2, The Crucible of Exile.
Here's the paradox with Jacob. He desired the right thing, but he had absolutely no idea how to receive it rightly. Taking the blessing through deception completely fractures his family. Esau's anger boils over into a literal murderous rage, and Jacob is forced to run for his life. He leaves home not as some victorious, wealthy heir, but as a terrified fugitive with nothing to his name except a walking staff and a stolen blessing. We can chart out his 20-year exile right here, and this period really serves as the grueling classroom for a spiritual formation. In year 1, he flees to Haran and immediately falls head over heels in love with Rachel at the well. He agrees to work 7 years for her father, Laban, just to pay the bride price. After 7 long years, he thinks he's finally getting what he earned. But nope, he is tricked into marrying her older sister Leah instead. So he has to work another 7 years for Rachel, completing 14 total years of labor just for love. He then spends 6 more years building up this immense wealth, until finally, in year 20, God commands him to pack up and return home.
But let's pause and really consider Laban's deception for a second, because the irony here is just staggering. Jacob's expectation was 7 years of faithful labor for Rachel. The reality? Laban squeezed 14 years out of him and gave him Leah first under the cover of darkness. The bitter, transformative irony is that the man who tricked his blind father in the dark, using a disguise, is now profoundly tricked by his father-in-law in the dark, using a disguise. Jacob, the great deceiver, finally gets to experience exactly what it feels like to be on the receiving end of manipulation. And this isn't just cosmic payback, it's intense, deeply necessary spiritual formation.
But here's the amazing thing. Throughout this entire painful exile, God's grace is constantly working behind the scenes. Early on in his journey, at a place he named Bethel, Jacob had that famous dream of a ladder reaching up to heaven. God promised to protect him and bring him home safely. And what's fascinating, and kind of funny honestly, is that Jacob's response was this conditional, highly transactional vow. He basically said, "If God will be with me, then the Lord shall be my God." He was still trying to negotiate. Yet despite Jacob's flawed, calculating, constantly grasping heart, God honors the promise anyway. He prospers him immensely over those 2 decades, and eventually commands him to return to the land of his fathers.
And that leads us right to the climax of our story, Act 3.
The wrestling.
So Jacob is finally heading home, but the return trip is anything but peaceful. He gets word that Esau is marching toward him, and he's bringing 400 men with him. The past Jacob ran away from is staring him right in the face. Out of sheer terror, Jacob divides his camp, sending gifts on ahead, calculating and strategizing just like the old days, trying desperately to control the outcome. It brings up this ultimate question, right? How do you face a past you literally cannot outrun? Jacob is utterly vulnerable here. He's totally stripped of his illusions of control. And in this desperate state, he does something profound. He prays. He cries out to the God of his fathers, explicitly acknowledging for the first time that he is completely unworthy of the mercy and truth God has shown him. He's terrified for his life, he's terrified for his wives and his kids, and he just begs for deliverance from Esau.
This brings us to the absolute turning point of his life. On the eve of meeting his brother, Jacob is left entirely alone at a place called Peniel, and a mysterious man appears and wrestles with him until the break of dawn. It's a massive physical, emotional, and spiritual struggle. During this fight, Jacob's hip is struck and literally shattered, but he refuses to let go. He cries out, "I will not let you go except thou bless me." Notice the massive shift here. He is no longer stealing a blessing in disguise. He is openly, desperately begging for it. Even while physically crippled, he is asking directly.
And in response to that desperate plea, something irreversible happens. He is given a brand new name, which represents a totally new identity. He is changed from Jacob to Israel. Now, Israel translates to the one who struggles with God, which perfectly captures his lifelong fighting spirit. But linguistically and theologically, it actually carries a much deeper meaning: God rules or God prevails. And this reveals his ultimate victory. You see, his victory isn't conquering God, it's a profound surrender. It's reaching the absolute limit of his own manipulative strength, becoming totally dependent, and finally allowing God to rule within him.
And this total transformation leads us into Act 4, the legacy.
Jacob emerges from that dark night a completely changed man, walking with a permanent limp. It's a physical, everyday reminder that true transformation requires struggle. This limping, broken man is no longer the heel grabber. He steps into his new identity to become the father of a chosen nation. When the morning arrives, he finally comes face to face with Esau. And instead of the bloodshed he was expecting, something breathtaking happens. Esau runs to meet him, embraces him, and weeps. It is this beautiful, entirely unexpected moment of pure grace. All of Jacob's frantic calculations just melt away. The conflict dissolves not through Jacob's clever strategy, but through something entirely beyond him. Jacob even tells Esau that seeing his forgiving face is like seeing the face of God. He encountered God in the intense struggle of the night, and now he encounters relentless grace in the morning.
And from this transformed, limping man, a nation is actually born. Jacob fathers 12 sons, born to 4 different women: Leah, Rachel, and their handmaids Bilhah and Zilpah. Now you can only imagine the rivalry, the jealousy, and the sheer tension in this incredibly complex household structure. I mean, it perfectly mirrors Jacob's own messy life. Yet remarkably, these 12 sons become the actual foundation for the 12 tribes of Israel. The nation isn't born as some perfect, uniform people with a clean history. It's born as a messy, diverse family that carries the exact same struggles as its founder.
Jacob really becomes the ultimate archetype of relentless grace. He desired the right things, for sure, but he acted wrongly to get them. He wasn't changed instantly, in a flash of light. He was transformed slowly, agonizingly, through the crucible of bitter experience. Over 20 years, he moved from being a master of calculated manipulation to a man of total dependence on God.
And ultimately, he represents a people who constantly wrestle, question, and fail, yet over whom God's purposes ultimately prevail. The nation of Israel inherits this exact imperfect identity. They are a people who contend, who fight, but beneath it all, the deeper meaning of their name holds true. God rules.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Jacob's life shows us that human existence, especially our relationship with the divine, involves deep, ongoing tension. Remember, his greatest victory wasn't gaining a blessing through his own strength. His greatest victory was receiving a permanent limp that marked his total surrender to God. So look at your own life for a second. If Jacob's greatest victory was a permanent limp, what ongoing struggle in your own life is God currently using to transform you? Maybe your struggles aren't actually failures at all. Maybe they are the exact pathway to relentless grace and your own true identity. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and I really hope this deeply flawed yet deeply chosen life gives you a fresh perspective on your own journey.